segment that we're going to bring you back on. But we've heard from the small business owners, the issues they're facing. Now, where can they turn for help? Here to weigh in is Wall Street Journal small business columnist Kelly Spores, Rod Kurtz of Inc. magazine, and entrepreneur and small business consultant Dani Babb. Rod, I'm going to go to you first because this is your specialty, as they say.
My bread and butter.
Inc. magazine,
these are my people.
Inc. magazine focuses on these folks. Is this similar to what you've heard from all the thousands of people that subscribe to Inc.?
Absolutely. I think this is a great perspective of Main Street. I'm glad you put this show together. Here's the good news. I'm hearing a lot of good things from them here. I think Barb said she started some planning a year ago. So that's a thing we tell entrepreneurs, to head off the storm before it actually arrives. Sean is doing a very important thing as well. He's reaching out to his customers and solidifying these relationships. Now is the most
even though they're
time.
Ordering less on an individual basis and causing him to have to lay off workers.
But I think it all comes back to confidence, that as a company you want to exude confidence. We're seeing, frankly, a lot of companies I talk to are having record quarters. They're doing very well, but they are freaked out by what's going on. And to a certain extent, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Consumers are skittish, not necessarily justified. Companies are holding off on hiring plans and new equipment when they may be doing just fine. So I think you have to exude that confidence to your
Kelly,
customers.
if you're in Sean's position, and you need, we're going to come back to you folks in just a second, but if you're in Sean's position and you need a loan from the bank in order to get over whatever, including maybe paying off your payroll, what do? It's not just fear, it's the reality of not having the cash.
It's a really bad time out there right now in terms of lending money. There are banks are tightening their reins, especially the national banks. There are credit unions and community banks that are out there that are saying that they're, lending as usual. They're still giving money. So, you really need to be looking at alternate sources right now. Cash is king. Save as much money as you can. And, start looking at things like factoring if you need to, and ways to cut costs. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses right now are looking to lay off employees.
Dani, and I want to get the panel back in here, but Kelly brings up a great point, which is that credit unions very often lend money out. We've had in the past, the head of the credit union organization that sort of collects them all together says we have been lending out money to members of the credit union, small loans, just enough to get you by a month or so. So these alternatives, plus lending money from your borrowing money from your family members. That's happening more too.
It is, and also we've got business incubators at universities that are helping match small business owners with venture capitalists. We have people connecting on entrepreneurs forums, for example, helping one another actually find loans. We have Small Business Administration still backing $12 billion in 2008 of loans to small businesses. So there are sources, but you just might have to get a little bit more creative.
Sean, I got to go back to you. Have you gone to the SBA, the Small Business Administration, or to a credit union, or to your relatives for money?
No. Since this summer, when things started to tip a little bit and I needed the money and I was turned down from banks that were SBA guaranteed, and I started looking at the 35-page application, how long it was going to take, which I know the current or the new administration is going to try to address that. But when I started looking at all of that, I decided no more. And that's when I borrowed for myself. I mean, as you know, I took money out of my IRA, and thankfully I did it when I did do it. And I'm borrowing for myself, or for my wife, I should say. Actually, I ask her before I do that.
Well, that's not bad.
That's
I guess
another show.
That would pass as sort of a family loan. But Bill, what about you? Have you had to take these alternate methods of borrowing money, or are you staying within your means and, like Dave Ramsey, forgetting about borrowing any more money?
Well, we are staying within our means and as much as possible. However, we've already been to our 401ks, and that hurt a little bit, but and we're prepared to go more if necessary. One of the credit markets, or one of the credit sources that we're actually looking at now, because we do employ people in an urban area who have low skills, is a foundation for what they call program-related investments. And we're looking at that as an alternative source. Right now, our business strategy is really to develop new markets. And for the first time in the history of the company, we're actually looking at selling a product to the government. Which is something we've never done before.
Well, and Kelly, the ingenuity of the American spirit of enterprise has no limits. I mean, even we've been in tough situations before, obviously the Depression, but in the 70s, the mid-70s was a terrible environment. Interest rates, if you could borrow, interest rates were almost 20%. So people find different ways of coming up with solutions.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're seeing a lot of companies right now, like Rob was saying, that are just really having to come up with really innovative ways to come up with cash right now. And this is the time to innovate. You can't be hunkering down and waiting out the storm. You really have to be looking ahead, staying confident, and being proactive.
Well, nowhere is it more difficult to stay confident than in the housing sector, which is your baby, which is what you focus on. How are people doing it there?
Well, they're doing it the same way. They're focusing on the future and really trying to find ways to maximize leverage themselves, essentially. Just make ends meet until the next month. And the same thing's happening in business.
Are people taking dangerous steps, like, for example, borrowing from your credit card, which could be a killer eventually?
About 40% of people in the small business community are actually borrowing from their own savings, which is good. We have about another 20% of people that are borrowing from banks and from family members, and then the other 30% from other random places like you're talking about.
And I have
cards
heard
and so
about
on.
credit card borrowing going on now, and that's a very dangerous thing.
It is, absolutely.
All right, gang, we got to leave it at that. We'll hear more from our panel in just a minute. Coming up on deck, how the incoming Obama administration will